Hey guys, welcome to the North Project. I'm David Caxero, and today I want to talk about how to overcome emotional eating. This is something that really plagued me in my life for a long time, and I came up with a few tools or practices that really help me overcome it. And if you find that you struggle with emotional eating, then I think you'll find this video really helpful. So, what is emotional eating? Well, emotional eating, what I've come to find is it's just a coping mechanism. It's a way that many of us have learned to cope with undesirable experiences or emotions. Sadness, boredom, frustration, whatever it is. Basically, what it does when we eat certain foods that are high in sugar, fat, or carbs, or salt, or whatever, is that it triggers the reward pathway of the brain. And when that happens, it helps us to feel better. So it helps to distract us from that emotion or that experience that was undesirable, that we're trying to get away from, right? And this usually becomes like an unconscious pattern. I know it did for me, where it got to the point where, I would just turn to chocolate or whatever, ice cream or whatever it was to help distract myself from what it was that was going on in my life or what I was experiencing. Obviously that wasn't good for my health. I ended up putting on a lot of weight. It wasn't good for my mental health because I started to rely on food to feel good. And this is true of anything, it's true of our phones or whatever. But today I want to talk about how to overcome emotional eating. So the first of 5 tips I have for you to overcome emotional eating is the most simple. You don't have to do anything. So it's pausing and just breathing. So it's noticing when you have the urge, or maybe you've already dug your hand through the chip bag, right? But it's noticing that. It's noticing that you're taking on this pattern. Again, maybe it's right when you have the urge, or maybe it's 5 minutes into eating already. But notice that you're doing it, and then simply pausing, focusing on your breath, and just watching the urge to keep eating. What we're doing is we're separating ourselves from the emotion. And it's kind of paradoxical because we're separating ourselves from it, but we're actually going into it deeper. When we go into it deeper through observation, which is pausing, focusing on our breath, observing the emotion, right? We notice that the emotion is here and there's almost like a background awareness watching it. Which one are you, right? I feel like I'm the background awareness, not the emotion. And so I can separate myself from it. And in separating myself by pausing, this emotion loses this power over me. And I don't feel as compelled to keep eating. There still is the urge to some extent, but the more you can practice this pausing and breathing, the less that urge has control over you. And the more you can take your power back. Feel it. Embrace that emotion. Really feel what it is. Don't run away from it, because if you run away from it, it'll only become stronger within you and your life. So pausing and breathing is one of the most simple but most effective ways that really helped me overcome not only emotional eating, but a lot of other things in my life that I was really compulsive with. Okay, the second tip I have for you is having a glass of water. The reason I found this worked for me in my life was because I had the urge, right? I had the urge to eat something sweet or salty or whatever. And I still did something. I still consumed something. So it was almost like I tricked my mind, and to some extent, that I was still consuming something, but it just wasn't that sugary, unhealthy snack that I was really craving, right? And by giving myself something other than the snack, I'm delaying that gratification. You're creating space between yourself and the reaction, which is eating. And so the more I could do that, whether that's through pausing, but through having a glass of water, the more I could actually consider if I wanted to eat that, if I wanted to eat the chips or the chocolate or whatever it is. And by having the glass of water, I almost got to regain my senses, my awareness, and again, take my power back and decide, you know what, maybe I don't want to have the whatever the snack is, right? So having a glass of water, I also found was quite helpful for me in beating emotional eating. Okay, the third tip I have is doing something productive. So I found in my life a lot of times when I was engaging in this pattern of emotional eating, compulsive eating, it was when I was bored, right? I was bored, I didn't really have anything going on, didn't have much to do. And so that was when I would start eating. But then I found that, okay, what if I did something that was productive? Chores, if I could do laundry or, just something around the house, or maybe, go and wash my car, something like that, right? If I did that, it would often preoccupy me. But then I also found that I would engage in emotional eating when I was stressed out, right? And what causes stress? Well, I found that procrastination causes stress, right? When you put something off that you should be doing. And I noticed that eating was one way that I would procrastinate. So I was almost killing two birds with one stone by doing something productive. I was no longer procrastinating, and I was preoccupying myself, so I was no longer bored anymore. And on top of that, I guess three birds with one stone, I wasn't eating emotionally anymore. So it slowly began to wean myself off of that pattern of relying on food to feel better. Okay, so doing something productive was really, really helpful for me as well. Okay, so the next tip I have is similar to doing something productive. It's slightly different though. It's doing something that's active. And this doesn't have to be anything crazy. Like, you don't have to go and run a marathon or anything like that. You can do whatever you want to do. Like, you can go for a walk, you go for a bike ride, whatever. This really helped me in my life, not only with emotional eating, but with a number of other things. So again, I normally turn to emotional eating when I was stressed out. And so one really healthy way of coping with stress is doing something physically active, working out, going for a walk, going for a bike ride, And so if I could, in the moment, realize that, okay, I'm really feeling the urge to go and eat something, instead going for a walk, or again, doing something active, because I do love working out too. I found that it decreased the amount of stress I was feeling in my life, but then it also helped wean me off of that emotional eating pattern as well. So I found that you replace eating with physical activity, especially unhealthy eating. And there's a balance here, but replace emotional unhealthy eating with light physical activity or just more physical activity in general, you're going to lose weight because you're burning more calories now than what you're taking in. So that really helped me, not only transform the way I feel in my body, but the way my body looks as well. So doing something active was a really great thing for me as well. Okay, so my final tip on beating emotional eating, and this one has been the most helpful for me in my life for breaking this habit. It's something I call the switch, and I think it's the most realistic, and that's why it worked so well for me. It's the same premise as having a glass of water. So remember, when you have a glass of water, you're still satisfying that behavioral pattern of consuming something when you feel this urge. But instead of having a glass of water for the switch, you're going to have a healthy snack instead. So for me, the way I looked at a healthier snack was something that wasn't as processed, had less sugar. I was trying to get away from processed carbohydrates, so I would have more, say, complex carbohydrates, so vegetables, something like that. My go-to switch snack actually was a handful of spinach and an apple. And it was not the most pleasant thing to eat. Having a handful of spinach, it kind of tastes like dirt. I kind of grew to enjoy it to some extent, but the idea behind it was that it's healthier, right? And it's not as sweet or sugary as these other unhealthy snacks are. It's not going to trigger that pleasure center of the brain nearly as much. And because it wasn't exciting that pleasure center of the brain nearly as much, that reward pathway, I was no longer really using food to override unwanted emotions. So spinach and an apple really worked for me. And I if you want to give it a shot, I'd give it a shot. It's basically just having a handful of spinach, taking a bite of the apple. I found that the apple kind of broke up the taste, I guess, of the spinach. It was a little bit sweeter, but yeah, it really worked for me in my life. So those are some tips I have on beating emotional eating. Again, they've really helped me in my life, and they continue to help me in my life because I still go back to that pattern of wanting to, grab the chips, grab the candy. I'm a big fan of sweets. I find that when I'm going through a stressful time, I tend to turn back or want to turn to food. And these are some things that have really helped me manage that within myself. But I'd say the biggest thing for overcoming emotional eating is that awareness piece, separating yourself from that urge or from that reaction, because you have the emotion and then you have the response or the reaction, which is going to be eating food. And that's what the context of this video is, right? And normally the space between is very minimal. So the more you can create space between the emotion and the behavior, the more control you have over yourself, the more you can make a conscious decision to do something different, whether that is going to be pausing and breathing, having a glass of water, doing something productive, active, or having a healthy snack. And those are all things that have really helped me in my life. So I hope this video helps you break your habit of emotional eating, as it really helped me breaking it in my life. And I'll see you for the next video.